Hey, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Tremor, and today we're going to continue the game engine series. We're going to talk about what a game engine is, why we are writing a custom one, and we will do the first design iteration, which basically means that we will pick a couple of components with which we will start the implementation of the engine. We will make a list of these components, and I will also give a short introduction to each one of them, so you guys have a rough idea of what they are about and what their function in the engine is. You might ask yourself why this is not the first or second episode of the series. I want to alternate between more interactive episodes and more theoretical ones, so the series doesn't become stale and boring. But I will also still order the episodes in a way that it makes sense to you guys. So let's start with the definition of what a game engine actually is. There are loads of definitions out there, but in the end they all boil down to a collection of functionality which enables the programmer to develop a video game. They usually consist of hundreds of different components which in their entirety provide the necessary tools to make video games. And just to name a few of these components, you have graphics rendering, which transforms your input data into pictures on the screen. You have input handling, so the user can interact with the program. You have window management, you have physics, you have game object implementations, which manage your characters, enemies, items, and so on. You have logging, and you can also have event systems, and the list goes on and on and on. Usually in engines like Unreal Engine 5 or Unity, you probably have thousands of different components which all have dedicated functionality to eventually make up a video game. So the next question would be, why would you write a custom game engine if there are already like 3, 4, or 5 major contenders out there? And I have to say, if you just want to make a video game, then it's really just better to use one of these existing engines. But for me, I have to quote a German proverb here, and you would translate that into "the journey is the destination, der Weg ist das Ziel." I want to learn how to make a game engine and how it works, and I really want to implement it myself. I started with the mindset of learning about like a game engine development. I want to learn the necessary coding techniques, the necessary physics and math behind it. And I also want to build a large application, which probably will have 10,000s of lines of code. And this is also what this project is mainly about. It's about learning how to program a large application, and you can see it as the example here is a game engine. But if over time I find people who want to join me in development, I'll gladly expand the scope and the size of the project, and we can actually build a real game engine. But for now, it's really like me and you guys learning how to program a game engine and all the necessary techniques and knowledge that's behind that. And now, just to give you a couple of pros and cons for making a custom game engine. On the pro side, we would have that you can decide which functionality goes into the engine, and you can learn a lot about the underlying techniques. That would be, for example, programming techniques, maths, physics, software architecture, and the handling of a large code base. And on the con side, we would have that it's a huge amount of code to implement, and once that it's implemented, you need to constantly maintain and update it because the underlying hardware will change, and also will third-party libraries that we will potentially be using. So obviously there are quite a couple of things that can go wrong as well, because it's quite an undertaking to write a game engine. Through it being a lot of functionality and it's quite complex to implement, you can get stuck at a specific problem for days and days and still not find a solution for it. Sometimes you might even come to think that you won't get past this obstacle, but up until now, through studying the underlying theory, watching YouTube videos, reading books, I always managed to fix every problem, to get past every obstacle that I encountered. And we will go step by step, and I will make sure that you guys understand everything in the necessary detail so that you can follow me through the series. So now that we got all the preliminary talk out of the way, let's start with the design iteration, the actual meat of the episode. First of all, we need to establish general properties for the game engine. We will make a 2D game engine, and it will be Windows only. As I mentioned earlier, if I should find people to join me in the development of the engine, I will gladly increase the size and scope, and this 2D Windows only thing would be one of the things that could be sized up. We will use C++ and OpenGL for the engine. And we will use third-party libraries where they come in handy, because otherwise we would need to get really deep into certain topics. Like, for example, in the last episode with the GLFW window library, that would be really unnecessary because it's a lot of work and it just wouldn't make sense to write your own library. We will write our own code where we think it's simpler to implement a basic version of something than using an entire library for that specific problem. And this also relates to our basic principle of the journey is the destination, because we want to learn how to do these things and not just use like a couple of third-party libraries to get the job done. But in certain aspects, it's just better to use a third-party library. So now the only thing that remains is choosing the components with which we will start the development of the engine. For this, I made a small animation screen, so the video becomes a bit more entertaining to watch. I will also do this generally for the entire series, like make an animated intro and include more animations into the series, so it's not just me talking and it's a bit more fun to watch for you guys. So I will put myself into the bottom right corner and bring up the animation screen. So as you can see here, I created this, let's say, display. On the right side, we see all the components with the text not readable, and we will pick from this box of these components now 7 components. So let's pick the first one, and we got the entry point. So the entry point pretty much is where our game starts and ends. And so that we can control what's happening during startup and shutdown, we define our own entry point for the engine. So a developer who is using our engine to write a game can use this start point. So let's draw the next one. Let's see what we get. And we get the renderer. So the renderer is one of the central components of the engine. It's the thing that takes the game objects or our graphics that we define and renders it on the screen. It's a very complex part of the engine, so we will probably take several episodes to implement it, and we will probably also have a couple of revisions throughout the series, because this thing will change quite a bit as we expand the functionality of the engine. So let's see what we get next. And the next component is the quad class. So the quad class functions as an underlying representation of everything that we draw on screen in 2D space. So we can define a position, a rotation, a scale using this quad class. So let's see what the next component will be. I should have used some drum rolls here to make this more dramatic. And we got the game class. The game class represents the application behind the game, and it manages like central components, and it also controls the startup, run, and the shutdown of the game. Now let's see what the next component will be. And we got the window class. We already had a small peek into the window management in the last episode where we implemented the hello window. And the window class really just lets you control like window creation. It keeps the window state, and it's a really integral part of the engine, because the window is how we interact with the game. So we only got 2 components left. Let's see what we get next. And we got input handling, and I think that really speaks for itself. That's about how we manage like user input and window events. Now let's see what the last component is that we will be drawing tonight in just a second, and it's the sandbox. The sandbox is really a testing ground for us, which enables us to test the engine and put ourselves into the shoes of a developer which is using it, and see if it works, if the API is clearly structured, and so on and so on. So like a testing project. And this concludes our list of components with which we will start implementing the game engine. I will go back into full screen camera mode. And this concludes today's episode. I want to say some things for the next episodes. Since I'm rather busy with work, I will not be able to keep up this 1 episode per week schedule. I will probably be able to make another episode in May, but starting from June, I will probably go back to making at least 3 episodes per month. I hope you enjoyed the small animations I made. I will try and include more of them throughout the videos. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, then subscribe to the channel and like the video. And I'd say see you next time. Bye bye.